There's a moment that happens to a lot of people, and almost nobody talks about it. You're sitting on your couch, your phone is in your hand, you've been scrolling for 20 minutes, maybe longer. You've liked posts, you've replied to messages, you've laughed at something funny, you've watched people share milestones, opinions, pain, joy. And somehow, you still feel alone. Not, I need to be around people alone, not dramatic loneliness, but that quiet, hollow kind. The kind that sneaks up on you after interaction instead of before it. You put the phone down. The room feels quieter than it should. Your chest feels heavier than you can explain, and you think, what's wrong with me? Because how can you feel lonely when you're constantly connected? And here's the uncomfortable truth no one prepared us for. We have never been more reachable and never felt more emotionally unseen. We can text anyone at any time. We can watch strangers cry in real time. We can comment on grief, trauma, joy, injustice, love, all before breakfast. But genuine connection, the kind that regulates your nervous system, the kind that makes you feel held and not just acknowledged, that's becoming rare. And it's not just because people are broken, it's because the way we connect has changed faster than our brains, our bodies, and our emotional needs can adapt. Loneliness today doesn't always look like isolation. Sometimes it looks like full calendars, group chats, followers, DMs, meetings, lives, notifications, and still, no one really knows you. This episode isn't about blaming technology. It's not about shaming social media. And it's definitely not about telling you to just put yourself out there. This is about naming something real. Because loneliness isn't a personal failure. It's a public health issue. And is quietly shaping mental health in ways that we're only beginning to understand. So today we're going to talk about why loneliness has increased despite constant connection. What chronic loneliness actually does to the brain and body, and why surface level interaction doesn't satisfy our nervous system. And how we can build real, meaningful connections even in a digital world. If you've ever felt lonely in a crowded room, if you've ever felt invisible while being seen online, and if you've ever wondered why connection feels harder now than it used to, you're not imagining it. And you're not alone in feeling alone. Let's talk about it. All right, here's a quick reminder before we dive in. I am not a licensed therapist or mental health professional, but even if I was, I couldn't be yours. I'm someone sharing my own experience and research, and if you're in crisis or need immediate support, please reach out to 988 by calling or texting, or you can text the word HOME to 741-741 for the crisis line. You deserve support, and those resources are there for you 24/7. Hi, my name is Jamie. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in Christian counseling of substance abuse and addictive disorders, and I was a licensed addiction counselor for about 4 years. I realized that I felt like my purpose could be better served through my writing and talking about my story, and that I wasn't what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I started writing, and now here I am talking about mental health. I'm extremely passionate about mental health and recovery topics, and so you're going to see a lot of that here. We're going to go ahead and dive into today's topic, which is what the loneliness epidemic actually is. Loneliness is not the same as it's not the same thing as being alone. Research defines loneliness as the perceived gap between the connection you want and the connection you have. You can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely. You can be introverted and deeply connected. You can be active online and still feel emotionally isolated. In recent years, loneliness rates have risen across all age groups, not just older adults. Young adults report some of the highest levels of loneliness despite being the most digitally connected generation. I want to just sit with that for a moment. Young adults report some of the highest levels of loneliness despite being the most digitally connected generation. Chronic loneliness is now considered a significant risk factor for depression, anxiety, and substance use, cognitive decline, and even early mortality. Public health researchers have compared the health impact of chronic loneliness to smoking, obesity, physical inactivity. This is not emotional fluff. This is biology. Loneliness is processed by the brain as a threat state. From an evolutionary perspective, humans survive through attachment and cooperation. Being disconnected from others once upon a time meant danger. So when connection is missing, your nervous system doesn't relax. It stays alert. And over time, chronic loneliness can increase cortisol, disrupt sleep cycles, increase inflammation, weaken your immune response, increase risk of depression and anxiety disorders, and increase sensitivity to rejection and social threat. This is why lonely people often feel hyper self-critical, emotionally exhausted, anxious in social settings, afraid of being a burden, numb, or disconnected, even when trying to connect. Loneliness rewires your brain's perception, and it makes the world feel colder than it actually is. Why does loneliness feel so widespread now when we're technically more connected than ever? I like to think that in the digital age, while we're more connected than ever, we have lost the sense of connection, well, because of technology. And the thing is, technology is not going away. It is here to stay. But when you think about how connected we are, part of, I think, the isolation that we feel has to do with the fact that we see a lot of people's masking online. People do things for aesthetic. People post what they want you to see and not how things really are. And I think this is something that I end up talking about a lot, quite honestly. But there's a lot of reasons. And the first one really that we're going to go into is quantity has replaced depth. We do interact with more people, but we do it in a less meaningful way. We have quick replies, we give surface reactions, we're not emotionally attuned to others. A lot of things get lost in context when we're communicating. That's why emojis are such a big part of our lives now. Your brain can tell the difference, and it's starting to impact us on a day-to-day basis. I think the other thing we have to consider is, and this ties back into the social media discussion and how it impacts the loneliness, because we are feeling more connected, but we're also in an age where even though we're not supposed to keep up with the Joneses, we have a lot of people doing that. I want you to think about Instagram for a moment and how, I don't know how it is now. I have not had an Instagram account for a couple of years, but it used to be all about aesthetics, bragging, lavish lifestyle. And I think we're seeing, especially this year, especially with big influencers, that people don't want to see so much wealth flaunting anymore. I'm not saying that there's not some people who don't want to see that. I just feel like it's not as popular as it used to be. Just like 2016 makeup is like not the same type of makeup we do today, right? I hear a lot of people trash 2016 makeup, but it is what it is. I like 2016 makeup, and I'll keep doing it that way. I don't care, but I'm not an influencer. I don't have a lifestyle or a facade to upkeep. I'm a hot mess, and I welcome it. I welcome it. And it took me a long time to get to this way where I don't really care what people think of me. I really don't. There is the performance-based connection, because online spaces like Instagram, like TikTok, like YouTube, like Facebook, like Snapchat, all these online spaces often reward productivity, positivity, hot takes, aesthetic vulnerability without real support. And real connection really requires mutual presence, not just the performance for others. And I think that the more popular and the more common and the more we're on social media, we're making connections, but they aren't the same. And I don't know how to explain it, but there is a difference in being in the room with somebody and I guess feeling their energy and looking at them on a screen. And here I'm saying this from social media. We also have the loss of the unstructured community, meaning community spaces are now online more often than not. So we've lost the third places, the community spaces, the group spaces. Even church can be done online. Even 12 steps can be done online. Therapy can be done online. Even seeing a doctor can be done online. Shopping, everything can be done online, right? So we've lost that, hey, we're going to go to the store every Saturday. That's when we're going to do our grocery shop. Now it's just we're going to order online and they get here when they get here, right? Or we go pick them up from the store. We have now more of a casual connection than an intimate connection. And I don't mean intimate like couples. I mean like there is a sense of intimacy with our friendships. The repetition-based familiarity is another thing that we've gotten away from. Everything is scheduled, optimized, or monetized. And that's why I think everything is just leading us to this place where we feel lonely more often than we used to. And we feel lonely even when we're more connected. And I used to always say, like, sometimes I would feel like I was in a room full of people and I could scream and nobody would hear me. I feel like that's where we're at with social media. Because now I have a lot of friends, I have a lot of parasocial relationships, a lot of acquaintances that I've met, but I feel like we're all fighting for the same thing. We're all fighting to be heard. We're all fighting to share our story or our message. We also have the emotional labor without reciprocity. Many people are listening constantly, supporting others, and holding space online, but not being held themselves. And I could say that I relate to this because sometimes when I'm editing these videos to repurpose, I see what I'm saying and I'm like, how often do I take my own advice? And I'm getting better at it because now I'm becoming more aware of it just by listening to myself and the things that I share here. I do know that I'm learning, but I think that sometimes we get so caught up in listening to other people's, supporting them, trying to give them a safe place that we forget about ourselves. And that ties into boundaries and self-care. And I've been on a tangent with those topics, so we won't do that today. We have to also make sure that we don't lose ourselves in the process of being that person for other people. This creates an emotional depletion and not a connection. And I guess this is going to be my phrase for the month of January because it's like the third time this week I've said it, but you cannot pour from an empty cup. If you are taking care of everyone else and you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to hurt yourself in the end. Why isn't more interaction the thing that fixes it? Have you ever thought about that? I think it's because one crucial thing to really remember is loneliness is not solved by having more interaction. You can be around a lot of people and still feel lonely, especially if you don't identify or relate to the people you're surrounded by. Loneliness is more likely to be resolved through safety, the feeling of safety, and attunement to others. Because your nervous system needs eye contact. It does need predictability. It does need the shared emotional experience. And consistency, repair after rupture, the ability to communicate. I think the biggest thing I see is a lot of things get lost in communication, especially if your friends are long distance or you've met them online or all you ever do is text them. I think that sometimes it's really, really easy to misunderstand people when you're not physically in a room with them. And I know that's not always possible to be physically in a room with somebody, but I do think it's part of the issue that leads to loneliness. And when I'm speaking of the loneliness epidemic, this is not, I know we hear a lot about the men's loneliness epidemic. I feel like it's bigger than just a man's issue. I feel like we're seeing this generationally across men and women and all ages. So the other reason why loneliness cannot be solved by more interaction is you can scroll all night and still feel empty. And part of that is the way these platforms are designed, because we're getting a dopamine hit or a dopamine fix, or we need to hear something or see something or follow something, or we end up down a rabbit hole. We're getting a fix or we're searching for a fix. And as somebody who's in recovery, I can say it's almost like you can never get enough if you don't learn to balance it. You can attend events online and feel completely invisible. You can attend events and feel completely invisible in real life, right? But when you're in a room where you have 100 faces on a screen, how are you going to stand out among the other 99 people? If you're in a crowd, you could fall down and people will notice. When you're online, you'll fall out of your chair and you may not get noticed. And I think that is why being online, especially chronically, can make us feel even more invisible than we might already be feeling in real life. And if we struggle with this in our daily offline lives, I feel like online it feels almost 10 times worse. I can't speak for everybody, but I just feel like it's so much easier to isolate, especially because it's like you don't always know who you can trust in real life. Yet here we are meeting random people on the internet. Can we trust them anymore? Connection is not about access. It's about resonance. What resonates with you about other people in the real world? And I keep saying in the real world because I want to make sure that we're differentiating between online and offline, because I think this can happen in both online and offline, but I think that online it's becoming more problematic. Ultimately, more interaction is not going to fix loneliness. Now, how can we build a genuine connection when everything's online now? Good question. Good question. Thank you for asking. Let's get practical. And let's not pretend that we can just opt out of being online. That's part of modern life. That's part of everyday life now, right? We can prioritize our relationships, our connections. Do not need a large circle. You need a handful of emotionally safe relationships. I would even say you could do with one or two. I think I have about 5, but that's because depth is going to be greater than breadth, right? I can have 100 friends, but I only need a handful of people that feel safe, that I can trust, right? And I would rather have 1 or 2 very connected friendships or relationships than 100 people around me who none of them understand me. I also think that another way we can build genuine connection in the modern day world of social media is shifting from consumption to participation. And I feel like everything I talk about, I feel like synergistically works together. Because one of the things I talk about is being 80% creator and 20% consumer. Because if we are consuming, we are not generating revenue from that. And I say that as a creator. If you're just here for fun, that doesn't matter. If you're here to get a message across, even if you're not here for money, you need to be 80% creator. So instead of passive scrolling, you need to be giving meaningful replies to your audience, sending voice notes when you can, having small group spaces, sharing projects, collaborating, having get-togethers, whatever fits into your lifestyle. The other thing we need to do is create repetition. Connection deepens through consistency. Same people, same space. Repetition. Connection deepens through consistency. Same people, same space, over time. This matters more than intensity. I hate to say like we're comfortable when we're complacent, because I really hate complacency. But when it comes to connection, complacency is actually not that bad. I don't know, that might be a hot take. But we also, and I've been talking about this a lot this week, we also need to start naming things for what they are. If we need to set a boundary, if we need to set a limit, if we need to name our emotions, what we're feeling, it's about identifying issues. Loneliness thrives in secrecy. So it's important that we identify loneliness for what it is. Is it isolation? Is it us not reaching out? Is it us not wanting to be vulnerable? Is it us being afraid to share that we just need some connection? Is it fear of rejection? I mean, I guess we could what if that all day, right? But we have to be able to say that we're struggling with loneliness and not feel ashamed by saying that. And again, this comes back to, why does Jamie talk about mental health issues, recovery issues, social issues? Because we need to normalize these conversations so they stop being stigmatized. Because they are stigmatized, especially, thank you so much, especially in the recovery space, mental health space, social space. You have to regulate before you relate. You have to regulate your nervous system before you can relate to others. Why? Well, when your nervous system is overwhelmed, making those connections feels harder. And we can feel really overwhelmed if we're in a room full of people, but if we're around our 2 best friends, we might feel more comfortable. Does that make sense? I kind of hope that makes sense. We have to start grounding ourselves, then reach. Connection cannot be forced. You know how sometimes you meet somebody and you're just like, ugh, they're not my jam. I don't really vibe with them. That's you telling yourself exactly how you feel. What about when you connect with someone and it's like you've known each other 20 years, but you just met 5 minutes ago? That's connection. Connection cannot be forced. If you try to force connection, you're not going to be happy. Think about if somebody's ever tried to force their friendship on you. Like, please just be my friend, right? And it's like, oh, no. And the harder you try, the more it makes me not want to be, right? Connection cannot be forced. It has to be supported. And in a lot of cases, it has to be mutual. Loneliness does not mean you're unlovable. It does not mean that you have failed at relationships. It does not mean you're doing life wrong. It means your nervous system is asking for something real. Connection is not disappearing. It's changing. And we're still learning how to find each other inside of it. If this episode resonates with you, please let that be a reminder. You are not the only one feeling this, and your longing for connection is not a flaw. It's human. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today while we talked about the loneliness epidemic and why we're more connected than ever but feel more isolated. I appreciate you for spending the last 35 minutes with me, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.